was also his department chair there in San Antonio. And so he's maybe an example. It's kind of a person kind of middle way up in his career who went through the KL2 program and has successfully gotten two awards.
Yeah.
And is kind of in hot pursuit of another one.
Yeah.
And is kind of at the stage of really kind of going from being an investigator, part of the team, to establishing your own team in a program.
Yeah.
So I think what the lessons that we try to kind of get from this are to both understand the personal and practical and aspects of kind of career development and to kind of hear really where you're at now and kind of what the road was like to get here and all that kind of stuff. And anything's on the table. I think that these work best when they're informal and you can kind of ask about things that ordinarily you don't really get to ask people that you might know something about.
Okay, sure. Let's see. So I guess I'll start from I went to so I grew up in Wisconsin actually. So my hometown is a place called Baraboo, Wisconsin. I don't know if you've heard the song "Everywhere Man" by Johnny Cash. Well, actually, it wasn't Johnny Cash who wrote it, but he sang it quite often. And he mentions Baraboo and Devil's Lake in the song. Baraboo was the name of my hometown, and Devil's Lake was a lake that's about maybe 5 minutes or miles out of town or so. So we had a circus that was about 4 blocks from my parents' house, and it's still there. Actually, it's still there. And then when I was about 4 years old, it was separated from the rest of the town by this really shallow river. And one day when I was 4 years old, I was looking out and I saw this elephant walking down the street. And then I tell my mom about it, and she of course doesn't believe me because I'm 4 and I say things like that a lot. And then, but then later she sees it, and her face gets completely white. And a little while later, we see the trainer guy going running after the elephant. And a little while later, we see them both walking back to the circus again. So that was my hometown. I went to a place called Whitewater, Wisconsin for college. So Whitewater was best known for Abraham Lincoln getting his horse stolen there, I think about 10, 15 years before he became president. That's about it. And then while I was there, I got interested. I was interested in psychology. I started getting more interested in the behavioral neuroscience, biological psychology aspect of it. And there was one lab. It's a smaller school, and there's one lab on campus that actually had a research program. I started working with that person, and she was doing work with medial forebrain bundle stimulation in rats. I don't know if you've seen this when the rats have the electrodes planted on their heads and they press a bar for stimulation. So it works on these reward pathways. And back I think around the 50s, that was one of the hot topics for that was what a lot of people doing behavioral neuroscience research were working on. But then by this point, this was in the mid 90s, late 90s. By that point, it wasn't really as a frequent topic anymore. But this was something that PI was she was very interested in. So I think one of the tricks about kind of progressing with your career, I mean, it's not so much that you have you plan out when you're 20, this is where I want to be when I'm 50. I think it's a lot of it's taking advantage of what's in your environment and learning from that. So I was able to get this really strong background in reward neuroscience, this area, and I trying to go forward. I wanted to get something that's a little bit more kind of clinically relevant. So the drug abuse stuff was kind of a natural progression from that, And also, I mean, just growing up in Wisconsin, I grew up in a small town, Wisconsin. We had a lot of issues with drunk driving and whatnot. So it's icy roads and windy roads in the winter. I lost several of my classmates through drunk driving incidents like that. My grandfather was killed in a drunk driving accident. So I think that probably kind of some personal, kind of also influenced me to be interested in the drug addiction work. So I applied to some graduate schools, and I got in with actually my first choice was to work with a guy named Michael Bozarth, who's at the University of Buffalo. He was a big name. There's the Bozarth and Weiss theory of dopamine theory of addiction, which was very prominent in the 80s. what I didn't know though is that he hadn't been getting NIH funding for some time by this point, and had been getting his funding exclusively from tobacco companies. Well, around this time was when the tobacco companies stopped trying to pay for research to show that maybe nicotine really wasn't so addictive, and just like screw it, we're just pay out class action lawsuits. So they pulled all this funding away like a week or so after I accepted the offer to go out there. So I had this opportunity to go to grad school, and but then at this point I knew I was he said he wasn't going to do research anymore, and I have to find someone else to work with, So, I came from a working class background, and having the opportunity to go somewhere where they actually paid for my school was kind of too much to pass up, and I didn't want to try and wait another year trying to get another graduate program. So I figured I was going to try and make the best of it, and went out there. And they ended up matching up with the lab that didn't have an active research program, and for 3 years, I didn't really. 2 years. I was spending a lot of time in the lab, but there was really not a lot of resources and not a lot of direction, so it really wasn't getting much done. I actually got this. I think kind of like the worst part of this was when I was there on a Sunday. Of course, the only one in the lab, and it was at the end of the day, and nothing was working. Those days, nothing's working out, and I'm just like, I'm just going to go home. And there's a bus I was supposed to be taking. I didn't own a car until I was 32. This was all the benefits being poor and going for academic career. So the bus that would take me from the campus to the train station, just the subway station, so I get back home, back to my apartment. That was supposed to be going once an hour, and so I get out there at 10. I'm walking out about 10 minutes before the bus is supposed to come. The guy's already leaving, so this guy's just going on his own schedule. I'm not going to wait around for however long it's going to take for him to come back. I'm just going to walk the 3 miles to the train station. I get to this fairly busy intersection. I wait for the traffic going across to stop, and then so I start crossing. Some guy comes around making a left-hand turn, hits me in the knees, go up on the hood, slams his brakes. I land back on the curb. Luckily, I had my backpack full of articles, so that shifted up, and my shoulders aren't super flexible, so I have to keep the straps really loose. So that made it shift up, and I had this nice cushion of articles behind my head when I landed back on the curb. I actually, my knee was a little banged up. I was okay, but it's just this is, this is like the worst possible end of this day, Yeah, then after that, so all these cars start stopping. This one mom who was taking her daughter to work at the Hooters restaurant nearby, don't ask me about that one. She takes me over to her car, and she's very hysterical. And I'm trying to console her, saying it's really not that bad. My lip was bleeding, so I bit my lip when the car hit me. And so she's like, I'm like, well, do you have any tissue? And she opens her glove box, and there's a pack of tissue sitting right on top of all the insurance papers and everything like that. But again, she's very upset at this point. She doesn't process that. She just starts throwing papers around everywhere. And she's like, I don't have anything. This will work. So she opens her purse. She gives me a maxi pad. So I just left the maxi pad on my lip. And then the fire department has to come for accidents in New York State for some reason. I don't know if that's standard, or at least in New York State, the fire department has to come. So I see all these fireman guys come walking over. I'm like, there's a pack of tissues sitting right on top there. Can I have those, please? And then so that was that story. Well, anyway, so a couple of years though into graduate school, I managed to. There's a new faculty member who was affiliated with the psychology department, whose name was Jerry Richards, and he was doing a lot of work with animal models of impulsivity. And this is kind of so things like looking at how delayed reward and inhibition and stuff like that, and especially he was interested in the neural substrates of those things, and also how they're modified by things like drugs of abuse. And this was kind of, I think, I guess, so I got the opportunity to work with him. One, because he had a very active directed research program, so that's what you needed to. That's one of the important things. You have to, in order to be successful, at all stages of your career, you need good people to work with. I mean, you can't. I think the image of the scientists working by themselves in the lab. I don't know if that's really ever true, and I think it's definitely not true now. I mean, it's very important to find good, solid people to work with. So. He was one of the best, most productive people. He was the best person there doing drug addiction research, and I think just generally very, very good scientist. So I started working with him pretty quickly once I had the opportunity to. I did my dissertation with his lab, but another thing, just working with him, as I started changing the way that I thought about a lot of drug addiction stuff. I thought of. Before, I've been kind of stuck in the idea of drug reward, and it's thinking of it's drugs are rewarding things that were abused, and you really think about it, that doesn't really explain things. I mean, most people will take, most people use drugs to some extent, alcohol use is pretty common, but relatively few people have a serious problem with it. So it's not necessarily the drugs. So I started thinking less about the drugs being the problem and more about what are the individual characteristics of, that the person that might be contributing to why they're having problems. So it could be something about like maybe chronic effects of drugs changing something, or it could be just individual differences to begin with. And that's something I got more interested in. Still doing rat work at this time, but one of the projects I did working with Jerry was a project looking at the effects of chronic methamphetamine on rats on a delayed reward measure. And so that was, it really, one is, I think that kind of got me a lot less enthusiastic about doing animal research, just because, you know, chronic methamphetamine is, I mean, you see what happens to people when they take methamphetamine, and these are rats are getting large doses every day, and they really had a rough time of it. And I'd really just, you know, I hadn't thought as much about those kind of, I hadn't thought about as much of those issues, but I felt a lot more hesitant, I guess, to be involved with animal stuff, and also just necessarily just, I obviously think, I think animal research has a really strong value, but I think I got a little bit more, I don't know what the word is, I guess wanted to see, just make sure that has, I feel like, I thought thinking more about like the cost benefits of doing this type of work. So I think just doing an experiment versus, is it really teaching us, giving us new knowledge kind of things. And also, I think I was also getting kind of more sensitive, like the kind of stuff that I was really interested in really wasn't all that easy to study in rats. So when you're interested in kind of more complex psychological, psychiatric issues, rats may or may not be the best model for everything you're trying to study. So that's got me interested in trying to think about doing work with humans. Jerry had collaborated a lot with Harriet DeWitt at the University of Chicago, and she did a lot of kind of like basically human analogs, a lot of type of the same experiments he was doing. So it was really kind of a natural progression going from working, that's where I'm going for my postdoc. I'd have to look at a few different places, but I didn't decide to go there. And one of the things I really liked about that was that, I was able to basically keep working on the same concepts, but with a whole new set of tools. I think one of the things I think is important as a scientist is not to get too hung up with the methods and the techniques that you use. I think there's a tendency, I think, especially as people get more technical things, get closely identified. They're really like the techniques they're using with their science, which does that make sense? So like people would identify, like when I was in graduate school, like HPLC was really a common technique, and a lot of people identify themselves as I'm somebody who does this technique. And that's really not how you want to think of yourself as a scientist. That's the way to think of it. Like as a technician, when you can be very good at different techniques, but it's really the science should be about the questions you're asking. And it shouldn't necessarily matter. Like you don't. It's like when all you have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail kind of thing. It's better to. So what was really nice about my postdocs, I was able to just basically take a step back. I developed a lot of skills and I couldn't, all these lab techniques I couldn't use anymore, and I had to come up with all new ones. But basically, having to come about, look at these, trying to answer these questions from a different way, I think was a really good exercise. So I was in Chicago for a couple of years, and that was a real, again, I came from a very small town, and Buffalo was a moderate size, but still pretty manageable city. And Chicago was, of course, the third largest city in the United States. And also University of Chicago, it's a very different kind of, I guess, like, so there was a talk there one time where somebody was giving a talk about smokeless tobacco, a tobacco chew, and everyone at all the other people attending the talk were mystified by this, like they'd never seen smoke. Like I couldn't understand, like I'm just like I felt this kind of out of place, kind of like which I couldn't quite put my finger on, kind of thing. But then I finally realized that like I came from this very different background from most of the people that were there, and so that was kind of one of those things I always felt kind of a little bit out of place. I remember when I was going for a graduate school interview, they had Thai food that they were serving. This is just jumping back a few years, but I didn't know what Thai food was. I'd never had Thai food probably till several years later. Well, again till several years later, but just like this food that was weird. It wasn't necessarily bad, but I never saw it before. And it's like little things like that you don't really realize how how. But the other thing about Chicago too is that it's a great city to live in if you can afford it. But if you're more economically challenged, it can be a lot less. So like I couldn't afford a car while I was there, so I had to either live next to the school, which I don't know if you're familiar with the University of Chicago. So it's this. It's this very, great institution, very like this, but it's basically this little island right smack dab in the middle of South Side Chicago, which is not very different area. They had back in the 70s, I believe it was, that they were having a lot of crime, and at one point a graduate student got murdered while leaving classes, and so there's a lot of talk about what they're going to do, and one of the thoughts was they're actually going to pick up and move the university somewhere else, like the University of Chicago in California somewhere. But what they decided to do instead was they went and bought up a lot of the surrounding property and just had developed this really aggressive, like campus cops are usually kind of taken very seriously. There's serious police force there. They go out and patrol, like actively patrol, like outside, like Chicago there. But so what you have but you end up having is kind of this little island where there's not really there's some nice restaurants, some nice bookstores, but not much else going on. And then sketchy south side Chicago all around that. And then so I lived there the first year, and then I didn't like that. So the next year I went to live on the north side in Old Town, which is right next to the lake. If you guys have been to Chicago at all before, I mean, especially in the spring and summer, it's just a beautiful area. I lived 3-4 blocks from Second City. I actually took improv classes there. That's where a lot of people from Saturday Night Live went through that, especially like the older Saturday Night Live people, they went through that program there. Their pictures are all up over the walls and everything there. But then I had to take an hour ride on the L train back and forth, and in the L train through some of the sketchy areas. So there's a green line. I don't know if you guys know what that one is. Don't take the green line if you can avoid it. At one point, somebody tried to let me in fire on the green line. This guy came up to me, and he's mumbling something, and I can't understand what he's saying, but then fire and burning starts coming up more frequently. Like, this is going south. So I take off my bag. I'm waiting. The guy picks out a lighter, and it's just getting really closer and closer to me. Like, okay, this isn't going to work. So I grab him by the wrist. I stand him up, and walk him back to the seat, and kind of like push him down a little bit, and not real hard, but kind of squeeze a little bit, Okay, stay there and leave me alone. So I wanted to get out of there at this point, So I started looking for other jobs, and so one of the things, it's kind of a transition from.
I'm not sure you should let them in. I don't think you should go up on 6th floor. That wouldn't work up there.
Well, I didn't want him to burn my knee, so. So one of the things I really struggled with in that transition from postdoc to faculty is like, I didn't, as I was getting through my postdoc, and I was ready to not be a postdoc anymore. But I didn't really have like a vision for like what a research program would be like. I felt like I felt like when I actually want to start working on a faculty program, I should have some idea of what I knew what I could do. I had like these general interests, but I didn't really see a clear path for developing a research program. That's what I really kind of struggled with. And so when I started looking for jobs, I wasn't looking for faculty jobs, actually, like research-oriented faculty jobs right off the bat. I applied for a couple industry jobs. I applied for a teaching job in Chicago, and I actually got offered this job. And I was about to take the position, but then, I don't know if I really want to do this. The nice thing about that it would have been in Chicago and not too far from my parents, but it's just kind of a dead-end teaching job too at the small school, and I don't really see that this is what I really put my I applied for a couple of postdocs. It didn't just kind of randomly. I applied for one. I think I applied for one at AH, and then I applied for one in Texas. And I think I talked to the people at AH, and I wasn't really interested in doing that one. But then the Texas one, they called me up as a neuroimaging postdoc in Texas, and it wasn't so much, for some reason I just felt like, like I was talking to the director there, and I felt like I had this really, I just felt like this was like a good fit for some of this. And I realized later part of the reason was that the guy talks a lot like Bruce Campbell. So I don't know if you guys know who Bruce Campbell was from like Evil Dead movies and stuff like that. Great B-movie actor, but like I just had this feeling I could just trust this guy. That's a good guy. And part of that was because he talks like Bruce Campbell. So it's probably influenced my decision, but at the time I felt like I was taking a risk. I went ahead and
Was that Peter Fox?
Peter Fox, yeah. And so I took this postdoc in San Antonio. And never had any, I accepted the job over the phone, had never went out to visit, but just like, felt like kind of taking a risk and went ahead and did that. One of the nice things I learned too then is how cost of living can affect, living too. So like like you're making you're generally making, especially early on in academics, whether you're postdoc or junior faculty, you tend to be making roughly the same wage, not terribly different no matter where you're in the country, but that wage can go a lot farther in places like, like Texas or Arkansas than it can in some place like, like Chicago. So that's, I got there, I started doing, got into doing some neuroimaging work. I also started doing some work with some rhesus monkeys too. I started doing, there's a guy who in the pharmacology department I was working with to train some rhesus monkeys for a delay discounting task. When I first got there, shortly after I got there, actually how I started collaboration with an MRI physicist there, Peter Koshinov, who the two of us, we wrote an R21 within probably a month or so since I'd been there. And then both our supervisors also went ahead and edited, and one of my supervisors took credit as a PI for the grant, but the two of us together both basically wrote that. And I think that's, Peter and I have been working for several years since then together. And that's those kind of collaborations I think have been really important for finding somebody who has skills that complement what you do. I mean, so I have a background kind of so I'm a behavioral neuroscience background, so I have kind of this really good, I don't want to say really good, so we're kind of taught to kind of think about, basically, kind of have the training's all oriented around thinking of kind of like that brain behavior interface, and so thinking, I've been trained to work with that mainly in the context of rat models, but it's pretty easy to take that over to work with human stuff too. So learn how to do human behavioral assessments and learn to do human with the brain assessments you do, which is mostly imaging with people. But it's basically kind of the same training, just taking it over to that different context, and then working with people that were very skilled with imaging, been able to do some really interesting projects over the years, and How
did you end up writing an R21 with Kuchinov when you really weren't specifically working together?
Well, I was in with the imaging center, so we were, and then it was Peter Fox had gotten us this, had recommended we talk to each other. And so Peter was doing all these really impressive high rate, like the goal was this grant was to wasn't specifically to do imaging with this particular grant, but to set us up for doing an imaging project later on. So I would one was to develop this delayed reward task for rhesus monkeys that they could do in a scanner. The other aspect was to develop some analytical tools for process imaging with monkeys. So when you do imaging, one of the things you have to do is take your image and register it to a standard image. You can't do, so you think of your brain. A brain's kind of like a thumbprint. Every thumbprint looks a little bit different. The problem is if you want to do like any type of group comparison like that, you have to have some way of comparing different thumbprints. And so the solution that came up with imaging is to basically be able to warp all the thumbs onto a common thumbprint, right? And then compare differences there. So there's some pluses and minuses to that approach, but that's one more reasonable place to do it. So what the imaging side of that grant was to develop this rhesus monkey brain atlas by scanning a bunch of different rhesus brains and then basically averaging them all together to a common brain, which is better than the approach used for the human stuff. What we do for human imaging, the standard approach then is just to map it all to this one person's brain, and I think it's something like the Talerac Aqua. This is one of the most common ones that's used, and it's basically this older, I think it's like 60-some-year-old French woman or something like that all brains are mapped onto and then compared from there. And it's just a standard, everyone's been doing it, and it probably makes less and less sense as time goes by, but that's the way that a lot of this has been done. That's what so this was, Peter had been doing a lot of very high resolution imaging with baboons mostly, but this was a pretty natural progression for him to move over to baboons. I've been doing a lot of work with these delayed discounting, the delayed reward type tasks with humans and rats, and so working with monkeys was not really that big of a step from there. So kind of we had, I think that's one of the things too with the project too. It's nice to, not to just replicate what we've done before, but at the same time not trying to do something that completely you don't have any track record in, but you show you can be competitive when it's like, okay, this is the logical step. And it's a significant step. It's not like trying to take a huge, it's not just trying to take a baby step or trying to go too far from what you've done, but this is a clear progression from what we've done before, and it makes, I think that's what really helps sell the grant. So then I worked with that lab for a couple of years. I applied for a KL2 grant, actually. So I got into scuba diving while I was in San Antonio. And I actually wrote a KL2 application while I was on vacation in Costa Rica. But then so I think the application, I think people liked the application some of it. They also had some concerns that I wasn't getting a lot of support from the pharmacology. There wasn't really much direction for my career. And then I met with Pedro Delgado. He decided to give me opportunity in his lab, or not in the department. Sorry, in the department. He tried to hire me for the department, which was probably about as best of me to went. It's funny. I was really getting frustrated with the lab I was in. I felt like I was really, we wrote that grant, and then when we got it, I felt like the PI was trying to take it in a different direction than what we actually planned on doing. And I was doing more and more kind of grunt work on the project and wasn't really, so basically I was getting pretty disgruntled. And I was getting ready to leave. Actually, I talked to I was looking at, it was even concerning even just like putting what I was at and just doing some commercial diving until I could get, until I could start applying for jobs to go on for, start putting some applications in to go somewhere else. But I was
just wanted to go on vacation, right?
Well, I just want to go. That was different. But no, I mean, like I was pretty fed up with this place where I was at now, and I was ready to just like, this is not working. I'm going to go get a job somewhere else. But in the meantime, I just need to support myself. But then I went to this meeting. Everyone else was there wearing suits and whatnot. I showed up there. I think I was wearing a t-shirt and jeans with a stain on my jeans from the barbecue stain on my jeans from lunch. Pedro ended up seeing something in me though, and he offered me the job. Then I applied for the KL2 program after I got into the department. And then I had been working with a group in psychiatry who they had a project. They had a project that was looking at adolescents. So back up step. When I was still, before I got my faculty position, I started working with doing some work with family history of drug and alcohol problems. Bill Lavallo from Oklahoma had started. He's in Oklahoma. He'd been doing a lot of assessments on young adults with and without family histories of drug and alcohol problems, or without alcohol problems. How he had gotten this, he's primarily been doing research on stress reactivity, and he started doing some work looking at alcoholics and how they have they're looking at their cortisol responses to a stressor. And what he's showing is that they have this blunted stress response. And then one of his graduate students asked him, well, do you know it's really alcohol, or is it could be just was the alcohol, or was it some pre-existing difference? And so that's what got me interested in looking at these family history populations. But he wasn't really a drug addiction, he didn't have that background in drug addiction research. He had started doing some imaging work in Texas just because he didn't like the facilities he had nearby in Oklahoma. And then, but he still, he was starting to get established. He had grants on this, but he still didn't have a lot of that background in drug addiction research. So I started working with him there, so that was kind of a natural fit. Like I had a lot of expertise in a lot of areas he was interested in, like delayed discounting and some other stuff that's related to drug addiction. So that was kind of a natural fit there. And we've been working together since, I think, about 10 years now, 10, 11 years now. And that's one of my R1s. He's a co-PI. We're co-PIs on one of the R1s that I have currently, which Jessica works on the project now. Then as assistant professor, and at this point I was on the KL2 program. The lab I was in, the lab group I was working with, there had a grant looking at young family history positive, younger kids with and without family histories of alcohol use disorders, and looking at how substance use disorders developed over time. And so that, for the R01, the first R01 I got was one actually just taking building on that grant that was already there and adding an imaging component to it. So we looked at how brain development was brain development related to things like impulse control and substance use.
So you went from a KL2 directly to an R01?
Yeah.
Not to another KL1?
Mm-hmm.
It kind of depends where you are in your career as to whether you're ready to do that. And you already had the R21 too, right?
Well, I wrote an R21. I didn't actually have it. Yeah.
We had conversations. I think we had conversations about whether to go K. I think we were pushing you to do K.
Yeah.
Like kind of a KL2 to K, and he was really hard-headed.
I didn't get that from the stories.
You didn't get that.
So where would you encourage someone to go from a KL2?
Well, so the two paths, right, are either you go from KL2 to small grant to big grant, or to another longer K award through NIMH or NIH, right? And that gets you another 4 or 5 years of additional training. And I think the issue is, are you ready? Do you have enough that you're ready to actually just do the project, or do you need to acquire additional skills that will then get you to the point where you are ready to do the project and be independent?
Okay.
We recently had 2 KL2s who went on to 2 other Ks, and they're actually going to be doing a seminar in a couple of weeks about their experience in getting those Ks out of the KL2 program, and that will be on the 29th. But one of them is a physician who needed additional technical training, and the other was a fairly junior PhD who just really needed to have some more time to develop her particular line of research. So it really does depend on where you are.
I don't know why, to be honest, and looking back, why we thought that was a particularly good idea, because
What, K or?
yeah, for him, you didn't really need any additional methods or, kind of training in something.
I think not as many people have done that route though. And I think it's a question whether to be competitive maybe too for an R1 yet. Or,
Yeah. So, this is also one of the issues about that time in your career, is that it's probably the last relatively easy opportunity to pick up additional skills that later are going to be harder to take the time out to do. Once you get embedded in a faculty position and you've got your own lab and stuff going, it's really hard to kind of take a lot of time out to learn something that's important to making a big impact in that area that you're interested in, but not a skill set that you necessarily have.
Yeah.
The bigger the grant, the more you have to do with less FTE, and that becomes the Ks keep you protected.
Yeah.
On the R21, what was your role there?
I went in as a co-investigator on the grant, and I don't even know if they put me actually even on as a co-investigator. I don't know if that's already considered a co-investigator when you signed and actually got the grant. I don't know. So that was
So can you talk a little bit? So actually, one of the issues, which I think you're kind of alluding to but not going into, is different mentoring styles of people that you've worked with, and I think this one, from what I am aware of it, was one that wasn't personally very satisfying, even though it did create opportunities for you.
Yeah.
But can you contrast some of the style of the various mentors that you've had?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 mentors I had that really kind of stuck out like in a positive way, like my graduate school mentor, and then Bill Lavallo is kind of like ones where like they kind of they seem to be more interested in, like, some people have, I mean, everyone has to support their own research program, but I think some people are going to kind of like go farther on a limb to let you kind of develop your own stuff, versus they want to have, they'll let you give you training, but it's in support of their own work. And I think at some point, for the latter people, when they're training you to support their own project, when you start veering off, that you're gonna have like button heads with them. Where the people that are thinking that you're gonna be veering off it anyways, that's fine. We just want to, we can work together and we'll both profit from it. And then like they also think, well, I look good. When do you go off and do good things on your own? Where the other people, it's like, well, no, you're they feel more threatened by that. And I think I think there's also, I mean, I think some people just struggle with mentoring too. And I mean, I haven't mentored that many people, and I can't say that I'm really that much better at it. But I think it's this issue like control of that, and kind of like they're trying to. I think in a lot of cases it's not really malicious intent, but even they're trying to protect somebody that they think they're just not willing to. It's kind of like it's almost like a parenting thing. They're not willing to let somebody go off on their own. So I think that's. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question. I think that there's some people are more micromanagers, like that everyone, I think, no matter who you are, you're going to succeed or fail to some degree because of what you do, and some degree in spite of what you do. So some people are very successful. They have a lot there's one person I think of that was very successful just because he worked really hard and he really just pushed everyone around, and that was great. But he also did a lot of things that probably hurt him more than he realized. And just like if you could let back and let people kind of develop on their own more, I think so So that's why I see sometimes when people like, with a lot of like like especially people end up being the head of a lab, is that they can be very, they can be push people very hard, but at the same time they can't leave that control. And then I also work with some people where they didn't really push people as hard anymore, but they still want to have control over everything. So everything just kind of stopped and waited for them to be, when they weren't having some type of personal crisis, they could actually show up at work and get their work done. So that can get frustrating too. I don't know. I mean, I think for me, I've always, when I was a little kid, I used to really like to draw a lot, and then I would draw pictures, and draw all kinds of pictures. And every so often, like my mom or someone would say, like, let's draw a picture for grandma. And like, okay, you have to draw this picture for grandma. And I could never. It was just something about that, like, I wasn't, and then I think the same kind of mentality carried through. Is like when I feel like I'm just being pushed to do something, it's like I have no motivation to do it. But when I feel it's free to do whatever I want, then I can do something more interesting, So that's kind of my, but some people like being in an environment where they have more structure and whatnot. I didn't care for that, and so when I was in those environments, I really kind of struggled there, I think, whereas I got an environment where they really had much longer leash or no leash, I feel like it'd be a lot better,
So knowing what kind of work environment you
Yeah,
prefer, and
yeah.
then trying to figure out what, you're not born a mentor. A lot of people are just kind of, it's thrust upon them because all of a sudden they've got a few grants and they,
Yeah.
It's kind of like you're not born a parent.
You're not born a
It's
parent.
kind of thrust on you.
But-
Boom, there it is.
I'm doing mentor training now because it should have been shown that you can actually teach people to be better mentors, and one of the key parts of it is being more explicit about setting up expectations
Yeah.
between the mentee and the
Yeah.
mentor, and even writing that down.
Yeah.
And we're, just as another infomercial, June 14th, one-day mentor training program here at UAMS. And we're going to do it this summer, but there's trials of people being more, of people having had this training and being more effective
Yeah.
afterward, but being conscious of that and being clear about what you really need is really important as you're going forward.
Yeah.
It strikes me so many of the things that you said have been about kind of, some of it is just blooming where you're planting. Then there's no ideal situation,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
several times you were in situations that were not ideal and you just kept persevering. So
Yeah.
there's that. And also then being willing to take a risk when it wasn't working
Mhm.
and keep talking to people, and
Yeah.
as your skills and your maturity, in your career progress, and saying, okay, I'm going to take this leap.
Mhm.
And it's all about kind of those relationships that
Yeah.
you develop.
Yeah,
You want to do
totally,
that.
yeah.
So it's,
But it's hard to develop relationships with people that you're just meeting. And, but yet it seems to be it's something you've done several times. You kind of encountered someone, there was some commonality, but somehow then it turned into a project. And I don't know if you have any, I don't have any insight about how you've done that, but I know it's hard to do. And I meet people all the time that I'd like to collaborate with. I make some efforts, I think.
Yeah.
But, it doesn't always happen.
Well, I mean, I think the difference with our careers, I mean, I have more time to really pursue stuff too than you would have it. Yeah,
What's
I have more.
What does it mean to pursue stuff?
Well, I mean, I just, like, I don't like, so we talk about having something, I'll follow up. I mean, like, not that you don't, but like, I'll, like we had, I've started working with the trauma group here. And so I just keep, this is one of my traits. I think my dad talks about this when I was a little kid, that I'd want something and then they'd tell me no, and then I wouldn't get upset about it. I wouldn't like throw a tantrum, just like, okay. And I come around to some different angle, ask them about that, keep on coming. And we'll never get upset. Like most kids would just like, so they start stomping their feet and all that. I'd never do that, but I just keep on going and I'd never stop until I got what I wanted,
finding collaterals.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, that's kind of it's kind of like and so I don't know what.
You're kind of thick-skinned like that, I think. I think you are. Huh?
Hard-headed.
Hard-headed.
Well, it's not necessarily hard-headed. So I mean, it'd be hard if I just kept on asking over and over again the same thing, but I don't do that. I come at it a different way. Like, I read the situation and I just my goals are persistent, but my approach
But you
is
don't get
flexible.
upset when,
Yeah.
because I know some of the groups that you've worked with, and I know people that have tried to work with them and stop because they perceive that they're not interested, or they're, there's usually they just don't, the interaction, they aren't necessarily welcome.
Yeah.
I think Lavallo, I think, is maybe different. He probably is welcome.
Yeah.
Other people that you've worked with, are kind of tougher. I think there is something about that, which is, I think, kind of what we experienced in the KL2 program, when we were telling you to do one thing, you did something else, and it worked. You know, and we weren't being particularly forceful about it. I think you kind of did this almost even, I'm not even sure that we were aware the application was gonna.
I think you did, yeah. You saw Ames and stuff. I mean, I was showing the Ames that was going on.
But you also, didn't you mention the R1 you were co-PI with the?
That came later.
Oh,
So that was
okay.
the first R1 was this one that I got through the KL2 program.
And you were just the lone PI?
No, I was PIs with one of these people that are maybe not the, you know, always easiest to work with, but we were able to be co-PIs on the grant. You know, so, you know, I mean.
So you put up with that too. That's the other thing, is that you've tolerated working with some people that insisted on maybe a disproportionate amount of credit for work that you've been involved in, and other people would have kind of pulled back and.
Well, I mean, but they also, I mean, like a lot of those people that might give people a hard time, they also tried to accommodate me more than they would other people just that brought a unique skill set. So like I was able to acquire enough of these unique skills that it was something that they didn't have. Like, you know, so a group needed somebody that's some imaging expertise, or a group needed some expertise in delay discounting. They would try and give me a lot more slack than, you know, and also the other thing too is I was never entirely dependent on one group. Even right from the beginning, I had like, so they couldn't, you know, some people can get very domineering when they have somebody that under the thumb. There's this one person I knew down the road who used to threaten his foreign post office with deporting them if they wouldn't do what he wanted. So yeah, but I never would, but I never, like, one, I'm an American citizen, but two, I mean, I never was completely dependent. Like, none of my funding was ever completely dependent. Like, I never had more than 50% of my funding because of any of these people.
Was that on purpose?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, it was always, you know, I mean, but so I mean, you know, I had experience in graduate school where I had somebody who was very just the first person I worked with. I mean, I do feel like I learned some good things from him, but he's also just a very belligerent, just not very just unhappy person. And he would badger, like people would tell me that years after that, like people would go to give talks for this area, and he would just badger the speakers, just completely trying to, and especially like students, stuff like that, just in thinking he was mentoring them, something like that, or working something out or whatnot. But so since then, I mean, I've been more careful about not having to be in that kind of vulnerable position. So I mean, I think, and as you get farther along in your career, that becomes less an issue. But I think that's kind of helped too.
But it also meant that you didn't have all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
Because scientifically, there's rarely something that's totally linear, right? You're going to have things that work and things that don't. And it allowed you to be exposed to and alternatives if something wasn't going at the rate or as well as you wanted it.
Yeah.
I think you also have some level of self-confidence that even though you were involved in something with someone else, that you could, that you kind of knew what you were planning to get out of it.
Yeah.
And that you kind of had a sense of that and were able to maybe, that you thought that you believed that you would be able to protect it well enough to get something positive from it.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes too, I mean, like, you know, you feel like, you know, people, like, I think some of it too, like when I started working with some of these people that you said they could be hard to work with, they were more accommodating me, and I didn't see a side of things that I saw until maybe later on when they started feeling threatened or something like that later on, you know, but I mean, like, you know, early on, I think they generally did try to be nicer to me. So, and then I didn't really see a lot of the side of things that people could be, those people being harder on people till later on, and wouldn't, you know, so I don't know.
As you begin to mentor people, are you conscious of avoiding some of those things?
I don't know if this is the right, I mean, so I should attend the mentoring center somewhere, but what I tend to do is I tend to err on the side of being more hands-off in mentoring. Like, I try to, like, give people direction, stuff like that. But I don't like, because I hated having somebody looking over my shoulder. So what I try and do is, like, find people that I feel confident in and let them, you know, and try and give them, make the resources they need, but then not be over people's, you know, so hopefully just might agree or not.
He's real good about, because me and Amar, his other research technician, we're both recent graduates, so we don't have as much experience as other people. So he's real good about giving us the background knowledge that we would need before we even started. He sent us to Oklahoma. We met with Dr. Lovallo personally and his research technicians. They walked us through the process hands-on for 2 days just so we could get a good grasp on how to do the concepts. And then Dr. Lovallo sat down with us and went over a good background knowledge so we can have a firm grasp on why we're doing the research we're doing, how it correlates to previous research. Because like he stated, they've been working together for quite a long time. So we're kind of coming in as it's branching off to other locations to acquire more subjects and more data. So just to make sure that we're in line with what they've already done and what they are doing so we can mirror their images. And when we got back here, it's kind of like starting from the ground up. So it was difficult at times just because we're all kind of new. We all kind of started around the same time.
So trying to figure out like
So-
the interests, like the university policies.
Exactly.
Like that,
That's the hard part, but Dr. Acheson is real good about if we do have an issue, especially if it were in regards to like protocol or just not exactly sure if we're mirroring things, he's real good about sitting down with us and Dr. Lovallo so we can go through and make sure everything is matching up just for consistency. And I do like the fact that, because I've had supervisors and mentors that are just on top of you and you kind of feel like your every movement is being watched, so you kind of feel more inclined to, oh God, please don't mess up. He's watching. He's gonna get you, and which of course makes you more inclined to make more mistakes because you know people are constantly watching over you. But he's real good about if I do have an issue or if I do have a concern, that we immediately sit down and go over it, and then I can go back and I know, okay, well if this happens again, I don't have to run to Dr. Acheson or Dr. Lovallo because now I know this is the specific protocol to address with this specific issue.
I mean, I feel like one of the things that's really important to me is like I always felt better when I could feel like I kind of owned something, you know. So like, you know, where people, when you get in that environment where they make you feel like you're just working for them versus like this is like they're really entrusting you with something and this is, you know, I believe in you, go ahead and do this, you know, develop something out of this versus, okay, do this. I mean, you know, I think most people probably like working in that former environment a lot better than having somebody just breathing down your neck. I mean, and maybe some people feel more, if you don't lack the confidence from like that, they need to have that constant direction. But I mean, you know, we're intelligent, you know, people at this stage, we're intelligent people and, you know, usually intelligent, ambitious people, I think they probably tend to prefer that other, you know.
You know, actually, one of the things that you haven't talked about also, but maybe be helpful to hear a little bit about, is I was always struck by the fact that you got things done, and usually faster than I thought that you would. And actually, some of the stuff you were talking about in terms of setting this up, I mean, you've only been here 4 months, 5 months?
Oh, well, since October, so I think going on, we were up and running by what, January though?
Yeah, me and Amar both started December 5th.
Right.
We started actually recruitment in January, and we had our first participant.
Right. So this is a
towards
hard
February.
place to work in. The IRB is slow. It's
HR
very
slow.
bureaucratic, HR slow. And yet, you know, in a pretty short time, you've gotten a lot of things in place. And I can't speak with a lot of specificity because I don't know about your writing, but I'm also struck by the fact that you don't procrastinate. You don't seem to procrastinate on many things. And
I feel like I do, but I don't know.
No, I don't see it. And you
Yeah.
know, I think when you've set deadlines, you don't seem to struggle a lot.
I usually finish, I've always noticed I tend to finish things before I expect them to. And I think, I mean, that was,
So how does that happen? Because you know, I think many of us struggle with that all the time, where you kind of
well, I mean, it's something I think it kind of,
right.
you know,
That's one of the reasons why I hired you. Was that it became clear that A, you got things done. You had a good pedigree and background. It's a good fit, and it was kind of no nonsense.
well, thank you. You know, I mean, so there's things that have helped me over the years, and one of them, you know, like I've read some stuff on time management, which I think everyone should, or if you have a chance to attend any seminars or anything for time management, it's definitely a useful thing to do. And I think even just reading like, was it blank on the name. The guy who wrote like Eat the Frog and stuff like that. If you look up Eat the Frog,
I've never.
well, the idea it's a time management technique. The idea is like you either do the most arduous thing of your day first and get out of the way, and then or you do that last and you do the easy things first. But it's the author's name's Eat the Frog, and he has several other books. I don't read the Eat the Frog one, but I've read some other ones. So that's helpful. I took a writing course while I was in Chicago, technical writing course, and that, learning how to write some, I'd like to take a refresher course again, but one of the things too that really saved a lot of time for writing, just learning how to write more efficiently so you can write a first draft that's in much better shape. Before I took that class, I'd write something and it'd be going back and forth, and it just, it was hard and just grinding the gears writing, and it took, so it always took longer to write stuff. After taking that course, it really sped up how I could write. But I mean, even before that, though, I'd have this tendency, like if I had a paper or something to do, I'd always finish it before the deadline. And when I have a big project coming up, it's like I tend to spend some time kind of thinking about it in the back of my head, and if I'm even not actively working on it, I start thinking about it. And whether that's, I feel like I just kind of start putting the blocks in place, and then when I start getting down to it, and then from there, I tend to make a lot of good progress. I mean, a lot of times I might be like, if I have a paper I'm working on, I might spend a couple days staring at something ahead of time, and I feel like I'm not really doing anything. But I think part of that's just trying to work some stuff on my head. And then once I start working, it tends to go pretty smoothly. Then not start working, but once I feel like then once there's these blocks, when I actually start writing. Like I missed the grand rounds yesterday, because I had a paper that I've been working on. I've been working on revisions for like the last week or so, and I look at it and I'm just like, I'm not clicking how to fix this. And then all of a sudden, like yesterday I was working, and all of a sudden things started clicking, and I lost track of time, but I was making, really making good progress on the paper. So that's generally how I work on stuff, is where it's, and I don't know what the strategy is, but it's like when I'm first looking at something, I'll look at that, I just like not get anywhere, I might do something else and come back to it. I look at it, just nothing really happens, and then all of a sudden that kind of turns over and it just goes smoothly. And I don't really fully understand, I guess, what that process is, but that's how I generally get stuff done.
One of the other things along the lines of getting things done and factors that influence that we haven't talked about is that at some point in all this, you got married and had a baby.
Yeah.
And did that change how you work and have an impact on your ability to kind of get things done?
Not really. I mean, I think well, my son is great. I mean, my wife is great. My son is great. My son,
Your wife is great.
No,
I'm just kidding.
Well, he's a really good-tempered kid. So he was, I think by 6 months old, he was sleeping through the night, and he was, he doesn't fuss a lot. He goes down to his, so that all makes it a lot easier. But I mean, I think having a kid and that stuff, I think it kind of made me more kind of cognizant of like what things were going on with work. Was this a really good fit for me? Is this really getting me long term? I think I tend to I started thinking more like in the future, is like, is this really, I tend to, there's a tendency, I think, to just kind of focus on your own stuff and not pay as much attention to the larger environment. And then when after I became a father, or as I was expecting to be a father, I started thinking more about whether this environment is really the best long-term fit for me and my family. So I think that was a big part of the reason for coming here. I mean, I had some concerns about the institution I was at, and what the opportunities were there, but also just generally the city, which I didn't really feel like was the type of place I wanted to bring a family up. That's why so this, and whereas like between the school and of course working with Pedro, I mean, I think one of the really important things is to have somebody like at like your chair level that actually supports and believes in you. I didn't feel like I had that after Pedro left, and I think that's and I think so Pedro was of course a huge part of the reason for coming here. I mean, like I looked at a couple other places, but I knew Pedro, I trusted him, and I feel like I feel like he has a good I like his vision for growing things. So that was. I'm not a very eloquent man, so that's but that was so Pedro was a huge part of the reason why we came here, and then also that, which was we felt like the community was good for families, so a smaller area, more more nature and stuff like that, less traffic, now the air pollution and pit bulls and such like that we have in San Antonio. So
So
There are a
you,
lot of pit bulls.
so it,
There are a lot
not,
of pit bulls in San Antonio.
It is
And
not at all
they try and raise
influenced-
them like cats too there, which is annoying.
so your ability to get things done at home or to kind of work or come in early or late, none of that's been affected by having a child.
I wouldn't say it wasn't
Yeah,
affected.
no.
The group I was in actually gave me a hard time about taking time off. And 2 weeks after I had a baby, which is a large factor in why I'm not there anymore. But I mean, it's hard. Like the first few weeks after, like the first few months when you're not sleeping. I mean, like it's harder to do like that detail-oriented stuff. I mean, like you just the group I was in, they were very big on making sure all the bio sketches looked exactly. They're very.
Let me ask you, I'm not sure that you're either. It's just not an issue for you, but one of the things I found when I was married already when I started my research career, but that I had to kind of struggle with, do I work at home? And if so, how much? And if you've got, a grant coming up and, you'd like to spend some time with your wife and family and, do you work at home?
I do like 2 days a week. Yeah, normally I work at home on Fridays and Tuesdays.
You work in the evenings at home.
I don't do a lot of that. I mean, this is like, so when I was an undergrad, I've never done an all-nighter. I've never drank a cup of coffee to keep me. I never drank a cup of coffee to keep me up for studying or anything like that. I don't know if that's.
For me, my son's now, he's 19, but at the time when he was the first 2 years, if people were asking me kind of nickel and dime stuff, it's just 15 minutes, this, that, the other. I mean, it gave me real clarity about saying no for the first time in my life.
Yeah.
And saying, no, it's only 15 minutes, but we can do this tomorrow when I won't delay my picking my kid up from daycare.
Yeah.
Or that it will not be 15 minutes that I'm going to miss that he's awake, as opposed to something that we could correspond about by email after he's gone to sleep, or we could do so. I started being very much clearer about where my boundaries were than I'd ever been. Even I've been married, but we were both kind of doing the academic career thing, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But parenting kind of really put that into shape for me.
I think the main thing that's happened for me is like, as mentioned before, I get these periods like, where all of a sudden like everything's going smoothly and starts clicking, and then what happened before, like a lot of times it happens in the afternoon, by 1, 2, all of a sudden things start clicking. And before I worked till like 6, 7, 8, or like 8 or whatever like that, and just come home when I felt like and I can't do that anymore, so I have to, I have to be home by 5:36 or whatever, because my son goes to bed by 7, and he fusses if I don't read him the stories at night. So, so that's a difference. And then I will work in the evening sometimes, not all the time. It's hard to block out that time for it. But I mean, I don't. I don't know. I mean, like when I was in graduate school, there was somebody who had done her graduate work there, did a postdoc somewhere else, and came back as kind of like that adjunct kind of glorified postdoc type position. And she worked like probably 90 hours a week or so, but like she never got anything done, So I mean, I think it's the hours you spend. I mean, it's I don't know. I mean, I think the hours you're putting in isn't the factor that's going to determine your success or failure. I mean, I think that I'm pretty sure there's probably not a really great correlation with the number of hours people are putting in, like above like a standard work week, and actually being successful. I mean, I think it's really kind of some of it's being lucky, and some of it's making sure that the work is going towards something that but I don't know.
Well, so that's maybe another version of this thing about getting things done that I've also been kind of I've seen in you that is a little unusual, that you have a good knack for identifying the things that are most likely to make the biggest difference, and actually getting something done.
Yeah. So it's upfront. I mean, I think that's part of that's spending time thinking about something. Don't just. I mean, it's figure out what's important and work on the important things. Like when you have a job, like trying to emphasize figuring out what's the essential parts and making sure those essential parts get done, and figuring out what's like the less impact. So I feel like I have a good good ability to prioritize, making sure, not that, and I don't know how to, I don't feel like other people don't do that, but I don't realize I do this so
Some people
differently.
are a lot better than others, and there are other people who can just be very, whether it's I don't know if it's a self-discipline thing, because that kind of makes it, I think it's a skill. Either you may have a talent for it that you naturally, you naturally have, but developing it as a skill, whether or not it's something that comes easily to you, is critical, or you're going to spin your wheels a lot.
Yeah, I saw this a lot in graduate school, like where the people like they would spend so much time doing stuff that didn't matter. Like there's somebody who would, this one person I remember I saw a graduate student in San Antonio who would, she was the head of all these different organizations, and then she would spend all these all-nighters trying to get all the data ready for a presentation next day, but then she'd be too tired that she wouldn't actually be able to think when they would ask her questions, and then just put her in a bigger hole. It's, I don't know. I mean, I think it's, I don't know. I mean, I think I try to I try to limit what I do. I guess I try and focus on like the parts that, like you said. I mean, the things that I need to get done, and the other stuff I had this recurring dream that I've signed up for this class that is like useless, but I forgot to formally drop it, and then I'm going to get a bad grade for it. I every so often, like every few months, I'll have this dream, but I think it's kind of it's as I've gone along, I've noticed this where like I've noticed. I mean, it's feeling like I can skip steps. When I realized that I could drop this out and it doesn't impact anything, I'll drop it out. If something just because somebody tells you to do something, but then if you can figure out that it actually doesn't contribute or it doesn't actually help you get anywhere, don't do it.
It's more than just in the planning. I think it actually carries through to how you write, how you develop grants, and the focus. I think one could argue that you're overly focused. I've heard people say this about you on some of the scientific ideas. On the other hand, that's what makes you successful, is that you don't try to do more than is necessary. You're able to kind of get it down to very practical and doable. And I think it's the ability to somehow focus on that makes the work understandable, the hypotheses clearer, and then the grant overall just becomes, kind of, as opposed to something that might sound great and might try to do a whole bunch of stuff, but it's just all over the map.
That's something that David Glad told me about. It's when I first came to San Antonio. He was somebody who did a lot of psychiatric imaging work. He's at Yale now. But one of the things he told me early on is your projects, you have these ideas, but they're too diffuse. You have to be able to come up with a clear, if you want to get your work funded, you have to be able to come up with more of a straightforward, hypothesis and whatnot to test. I mean, it's it may not be the complete picture of everything, but you need to be able to nail it down to something that can be that yours can have. So the other thing, I think when you think about getting funding, which I think is really important to internalize, is to really understand how the grant review process works. So the process isn't designed to pull out the absolute best applications and really rank them. I mean, you'll get a score, but getting a 1 versus 2 doesn't necessarily mean that your application is necessarily better. How that so you send out your applications, and then they'll go to three different people who get this on top of 8, 9, 10 other applications reading at the same time. They're doing this on top of their regular jobs. Okay, so they have a very limited amount of time to do this, and they may or may not be actually properly blocking enough time to do this. So they're going to take it, and they may not necessarily know your area all that well, right? So they're going to read through it, hopefully do a diligent job of that, and then based on the scores, if it happened to get above some threshold, they'll get a chance to talk about it for 15 minutes in front of a room of people who probably never look at your application at all, and they're going to vote, and they're going to decide whether you get an application or not. So that's a system that's really good at weeding out bad applications. It's not very good at really ranking, finding the absolute top. So it's basically, what I'm saying is it's really kind of a crapshoot getting your grant funded. So you get a grant funded, it's good, but you probably shouldn't be thinking you're all that awesome just because you got grant funded. And at the same time, if your grant doesn't get funded, you probably shouldn't take it too hard. So. It's one of those things so the solution to that is to be able to write good application, but so that basically, so when you think about going for funding, writing a lot of crappy applications will not do you any good. Writing one good application probably may or may not help you. So you really have to write
A lot of good ones.
well, yeah, I mean, but it's right. But the important things have to be good. I mean, so if they're not good, you have no chance. But you know, it's right.
And the other piece of that is that people have limited attention spans and time, is don't make them work too hard. Follow the
Yeah,
directions,
yeah.
make sure that it's clear and polished, so that the idea can be the best one in the world.
Yeah.
If you cloud it up in the writing, or you don't do things so it's easy for them to see what your point is.
Yeah.
You'll get lost.
Which is why, I mean, that's what David, I mean, when David explained, you know, to build, make a successful grant in this kind of area, you have to build, but there's a lot of variables you're dealing with. Focus, you know, come up with something that, you know, and that hypothesis may not be the all explaining thing of everything, but it's something you can test, and that's something you can get to explain to other people, you know.
I'm conscious of the time, because I think Bryce had a subject he needed to go and see.
It is,
but other people may need to.
It's 9:39. If anybody has questions or anything, I think it'd be a good time. I had a question myself.
Sure.
So you were talking about your R21 and you were frustrated because, you know, you kind of just felt like some cog in a machine working.
Yeah.
As someone who now has R01s and has people working for them, what advice can you give to people in the lower stage? It might be, you know, just a co-I or a worker on a grant. If they're feeling overlooked or if they're feeling like it's not working out for them, what advice do you have for them as for approaching the PI? Now that you've been a PI, what advice do you have
Well, it's a little
to
different.
deal with that situation?
I didn't have like, it'd be like if I had somebody that developed, like a lower ranking person that developed the grant with me, and then you know, so it's not quite the same situation as what I have now, so I haven't really encountered that. I think from the flip side thing, I don't know what the solution is. I mean, I think people who are an established investigator, they do things the way they like to do them. I mean, I think you break things up, and I think you can try and mediate. I had an instance where I asked somebody to mediate, and they just canceled all their meetings with me. So that was, you know, so I don't know what this. I mean, I think you try and work. I mean, the short answer is you try and work things out, and you also try and have other options too if that doesn't work out too. I mean, like you can't, you know, it's. You know, mentoring relationships, they don't necessarily have to last forever. I mean, you can work with somebody for a few years and still get quite a bit out of that. Doesn't mean it's a bad relationship, but it just doesn't necessarily mean it's going to have that person mentoring you forever. I mean, you are dynamically progressing through career stage at this point, and like who you are now is it's kind of like same like relationship advice for like a younger person. I mean, like, you know, who you are when you're 18 is probably the same person you might be at when you're 23, or the same thing as a scientist. Who you are, you know, when you just finished your graduate school work versus when you started your faculty position, you could be you can be in a different place there, you know. So.
And the same thing is like some people you just want to go out to lunch with, other
Yeah.
people you want to date seriously, and somebody.
Yeah.
And so you can have different levels of engagement with
Yeah.
in these mentoring relationships.
Is there, speaking of mediation, like in law school, they take whole courses on mediation. People will make a career out of it. Would there be any way to have someone come and talk to us about how to mediate between?
In a conflict, a scientific environment conflict, we can look at that and see.
I mean, it would just be really interesting, 'cause I don't think people talk about how it's important, but no one actually tells you how to do it.
So I think we certainly can look at what's available to
Okay.
mediate once we do things in professional development about conflict resolution, and that's kind of the same
Yeah,
thing.
same thing.
Part of it is for, you know, your expectations about what you're going to do on a grant when you're a co-I and things like that, or how the paper's going to work, you know, like who's going to take the lead on these, who's authorship stuff, having that negotiated up front and having it clear.
Well, you can have a clear and negotiate up front, doesn't necessarily mean the person
And
gets
then
to do it.
you need the conflict resolution. It doesn't work, but if you never talked about it, everybody could have totally different assumptions. And then everybody kind of gets screwed because everybody's unhappy and you don't never talk about it.
I mean, the issues I've had over the years, but one of those things hadn't been worked out in front, and then the person in charge decided that they didn't have to follow the body sense, you know. So, and then it's tough to try and find some recourse for that. So, like, you know, like who do you go to then? You know, without going completely up the chain. So I mean, like, you know, within a department, they tend to be biased towards supporting the senior person, you know. So I mean, it's like that's the person who has this track record bringing all this money in. Who are you? And then they say that they'll, you know, well, you know, like I could say, well, I didn't have a big role in bringing these grants, and the person's like, no, that was all me. I was just kind of, you know, I was just supporting this person the whole time, which happened to me, you know. But
Did you have it in writing?
for what? Yeah.
Like email train or something about what the authorship would be? And
No, we had when you submit a multiple PI grant,
You had it in the
there's a
grant.
multiple PI plan that says what's going to happen, and So.
I think that the problem with mediation in an academic center between people who are at different power levels.
Yeah.
Gets challenging, and these places aren't quite the same as others in that the differential in power and the diffuseness often of relationships and authority in a place like this, makes it tricky. And I think ultimately your people skills in trying to understand what the other person involved in the conflict is about, and to have some estimate of risk. So I think more than conflict resolution, it's about maybe trying to get someone who can be a mentor or a confidant who can help you to think it through. Because there are situations that even though you wish it could come out better, where it's a lose-lose, even though it shouldn't be, it is. And so then you kind of have to decide, should I cut my losses? And how do I, kind of exit this relationship or this conflict? Or is it something that I can achieve a goal and still come out of it intact? And they can be very, complex things. And certainly as a department chair, I try to provide advice to people that come in and ask me things like that. And you're right, you do have longer standing relationships with more senior people often in a different kind of relationship. But most of the time, you're pretty aware of the limitations too. And, you kind of have a different level of viewpoint about the role of various people in a conflict. And I think at worst, it'll provide some advice, but even that, I think you do want to think carefully about, kind of what you're hoping to obtain or achieve, and also to kind of think through, probably with somebody else, to get perspective on, do you have a role that, because I think probably the worst thing that could happen would be if you're part of the problem, or equal part of the problem, and then you go to complain to someone and they see that, but you don't.
Yeah.
And then, it doesn't necessarily get you anywhere. Sometimes talking to a colleague or a friend, they're more able to say, well, maybe there's some aspect of this that's you, or no, this is really grossly inappropriate, and I know a couple of people who had the same problem, and you really need to do X, Y, and Z. And so I think kind of talking to various people, at our institution here, we also have some folks like Jan Shorey, who's now in the provost's office, and there's someone's going to be coming into the School of Medicine as a faculty development dean soon. And those people are actually also independent of your home department, and you can kind of seek them out for confidential advice and guidance when you run into a conflict situation. But more information and advice before you choose a path that's going to kind of enhance conflict is usually worthwhile.
So one of the things that really helped me too is I had, like I mentioned before, I always worked with multiple groups of people. So when I was having issues with somebody, I could always, not that I have issues with people that often, but when something came up, I could talk to the other group. And also, my father-in-law also has been in academics for 3 years. He's a vice dean of a new school out in Las Vegas now. But that was when I talked to him too a lot about when I was having some issues going on. So
I think we're right about time. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you everybody for attending. As Dr. Aiken alluded to, we do have an event on the 29th. It's 11 to 1. That one's actually going to be in the Joe Ellen Ford Auditorium. It's a round table, and we're going to broadcast it to the different campuses. But if you can come in person, please come in person, because it's kind of weird when you have a round table and like 3 people in the room. So it'll be in Joe Ellen Ford Auditorium, which is in the Institute on Aging. It's their nice auditorium down there on the ground level.
Specifically about K awards.
Yeah, it's specifically about K awards and people's experiences with K awards. So that'll be a good one to attend. And then our next event in this series is Renee Raines, who heads up ORSP. She's going to talk about budgeting for grants and a little bit about what ORSP services they can provide. And that one is on the 24th, I believe. As I think that's saved. I'm going to pull up my calendar really quick.
It is.
Yeah. So come to that if you are interested in that sort of thing. Renee Raines is great. She's been with UMS for years and she knows all that stuff in and out. So, yes.
Is there an email list for announcements?
I can add you to the email list. It's sent out on to by like Dr. Shore's group to like all faculty.
Okay.
But I can add you to the list. It's not a problem. Okay. Yeah. So I can add
So
you.
I'll email.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I can add you because I send it to several different groups. So if you're not on one of those groups, I'm happy to send it to you individually as well. So thank you everyone for coming. Thank you Jennifer for joining us from afar.
Thanks.
Question for you is,